Imagine sitting by a deserted riverbank as the sun begins to set. The gentle ripples reflect the cinnamon golden light. There is no noise, only the steady rhythm of your breath and the absolute stillness of reality. Have you ever, in these twilight years, suddenly felt forgotten or feared the emptiness when your children and grandchildren are busy with their own lives? The world often plants in our minds the idea that in old age, living alone is a sign of loneliness and abandonment. But through the lens of Buddhist wisdom, solitude is not an empty abyss, but a sacred gateway leading to freedom. Instead of being a source of fear, it brings peace and the opportunity to self-discover the depths of the soul. Old age is not the final chapter of social depletion, but a season of personal liberation. This is a journey not to renounce companionship, but to embrace stillness as a great teacher. Together we will explore why growing older is not about loss, but about rediscovering the truest essence of who we are. Lesson 1. Understanding the shift in priorities. As the timeline of life passes, the values we once revered naturally begin to shift their positions. In our younger years, we often rushed into the world with an intense thirst for connection and recognition. We viewed friendship as a yardstick to define ourselves and to create a sense of belonging to a certain community. At that time, we collected relationships like exhibition trophies, believing that the more people surrounding us, the more complete our lives would become. However, Buddhist philosophy teaches that the self is merely transient, and the identities we cling to are actually fragile constructs of the ego. At a certain stage, the hustle to belong to the crowd gradually gives way to a completely different kind of longing, the aspiration to find peace. In the twilight of life, a profound truth begins to reveal itself, which is that fulfillment doesn't come from the number of people around us, but from our ability to sit still in silence with ourselves. The whirlwind urging us to constantly interact, to be seen, or to fill every gap with meaningless conversations begins to subside. Instead, we learn to enjoy simple yet life-affirming joys. It is the fresh air of the early morning, the moment a flower slowly unfolds, or the warm feeling of holding an old, well-worn book in our hands. This is not loneliness, it is freedom. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from craving and clinging to impermanent things. Friendship, like all things, follows the law of birth, death, and transformation. When we stop trying to hold on to connections simply to fill a void, we begin to experience relationships more freely, no longer bound by expectations or possessiveness. This shift in priorities does not mean we stop caring for others, but that we begin to interact more authentically instead of out of obligation. We become more selective, not out of selfishness, but due to the awakening of wisdom. We realize that human energy is finite, and instead of scattering it into useless social encounters, we choose to invest it in what truly matters. Many might view this withdrawal as a type of isolation, but in reality it is a process of deepening self-awareness and presence. When alone, we are not empty at all. On the contrary, we are filled with the richness of our own souls. In that state of being, we discover a radiant beauty. We no longer need the world to recognize or validate our worth, because from the very beginning, we were already a complete whole. Lesson 2. Freedom of self-reliance. One of the deepest lessons in Buddhist philosophy is the spirit of self-reliance. Look back at the journey of the Buddha who abandoned a magnificent palace, left his family, and cast off all worldly wealth to embark on a solitary quest for enlightenment. He understood that all clinging to external factors is the seed of suffering. As we grow older, a truth gradually emerges that much of our lives has been spent trying to please others, striving to fit into social molds, or maintaining relationships out of mere responsibility. But now, old age grants us a precious privilege, the permission to shed those heavy expectations. We no longer need to depend on external relationships to validate our self-worth. Instead, we turn our gaze inward and cultivate a sense of wholeness from within our own souls. Initially, the concept of relying on oneself might make you feel a bit uneasy. After decades of always being surrounded by people, engaging in countless conversations and navigating social expectations, taking a step back may seem like an unnatural shift. However, over time, a new realization will dawn. Self-reliance is not about severing all ties or rejecting companionship. It is about freedom. It is the freedom to choose to connect when we truly want to, rather than out of obligation. It is the right to prioritize inner peace over the applause of the crowd, the right to simply be ourselves without being pulled by the need to affirm social status. Recall the moments when you felt most at ease in your life. Perhaps it was a quiet morning with only the sound of birds singing outside the window, or a silent afternoon watching the waves crash upon the shore. Those moments were peaceful, not because someone was by your side, but because that space allowed stillness to speak. The ability to be fully present without distraction is the very core of self-reliance. In our early years, we busily sought fulfillment from the outside through recognition and a sense of belonging. But as the years pass, we realize that true contentment is not something that needs to be searched for. It has always been inherently present within each of us. There is a profound satisfaction in knowing that you are enough without needing the world to confirm it. The beauty of self-reliance is that it allows us to interact with others more sincerely. Instead of maintaining friendships out of necessity or fear, we engage because we truly cherish their presence. There is no more desperation, no more sense of deficiency driving us to cling to connections that have grown cold. We give generously without expecting anything in return, because we have found abundance within ourselves. This shift in perspective is intensely liberating. Instead of fearing being alone, we learn to treasure it. Instead of seeing ourselves as lonely, we see ourselves as independent. In that independence, we find strength, peace, and a life no longer led by external noise, but by the steadfast voice from deep within our spirit. Everything we once craved, such as love, peace, and understanding, has in fact never left us. Lesson 3. Quality over quantity in the art of connection. Buddhist philosophy reminds us that the essence of all relationships lies within the law of impermanence. Friends come and go. Some fade away over the years, while others remain only as fragmented pieces of memory. Instead of grieving over separation, we should learn to cherish them as precious moments on our journey. As we enter the twilight years, we begin to understand a core truth. What matters is not the number of people present in our lives, but the depth of the connections we share. One profound conversation where two souls truly touch carries greater meaning than a lifetime of superficial social interactions. In Zen teachings, there is a famous saying, "When drinking tea, just drink tea." This means that in whatever we do, we must place our full presence into it. This principle applies perfectly to relationships. Instead of scattering your energy among too many people, devote your full attention to those who truly nourish your soul. Imagine sitting with an old friend over a simple meal. There is no need for grand gestures, no pressure to impress, just pure presence. In that moment, you realize that authentic connection does not lie in the frequency of meetings or extravagance, but in sincerity. This difference becomes clear when compared to standing in a room full of acquaintances, where stories only skim the surface, never touching the deepest parts of our being. In our youth, we may have sought confidence through numbers, more friends, more gatherings, more noise. But old age grants the wisdom to select with intention. We no longer feel the need to respond to every invitation or maintain relationships that no longer bring joy. This is not selfishness, but wisdom in using our precious time and energy. This perspective also helps us redefine the concept of companionship. Connection can appear in the simplest forms: a smile given to a stranger on the street, the silent understanding between old friends, or the soothing embrace of nature. Especially by prioritizing quality, we learn the art of deep listening. In Buddhist tradition, listening is considered an act of love. When we listen without judgment or preparing a response, we are honoring the presence of the other person. It is the sincerity and love we radiate that stay the longest, creating the true wealth of a human life. Lesson 4. The beauty of solitude and reflection. In Buddhist tradition, solitude is not a meaningless void, but a sacred sanctuary. Monks often retreat into silence not because they despise the world, but because they long to understand it more deeply. This principle applies perfectly to the stage of old age. Instead of filling every gap in time with pointless chatter, we can embrace silence as a magical space to reflect upon ourselves. When we sit back in stillness, we finally have enough time to process our life experiences, accept our past, and let go of remaining regrets. It is within this very silence that we discover a radiant truth. We are already complete, even when we are alone. There is a sacred beauty in being solitary with our thoughts, allowing ourselves the space to truly listen to our inner voice. In the constant bustle of life, moments of silence become rare and are often overlooked. Yet it is within that silence that the opportunity for growth lies. Too many people confuse loneliness with solitude, but these are two entirely different states. Loneliness is the absence of connection with others, while solitude is the full presence of one's own self. When we learn how to befriend ourselves, solitude becomes a gift rather than a burden. It grants us the clarity to perceive life exactly as it is, a short yet beautiful journey where every moment is an invitation to deepen our understanding. Many spiritual masters throughout history have found their greatest insights in solitude. The Buddha himself meditated in stillness under the Bodhi tree before attaining supreme enlightenment. Poets, philosophers, and sages have all turned their gaze inward to seek the truth. Furthermore, solitude nurtures creativity and introspection. When alone, we are free to engage in activities that bring pure joy, such as writing, painting, gardening, or simply sitting still in contemplation. These solitary endeavors enrich the soul and remind us that fulfillment does not necessarily require the presence of others. Of course, embracing solitude does not mean closing the door completely to the world, but rather finding a balance between connecting outwardly and retreating toward the self. When we learn to sit comfortably with ourselves, we will realize that we are never truly alone, for we are always surrounded by the presence of our own soul. Lesson 5. Family and community in interdependent relations. As external social relationships gradually settle, the meaning of family and community often becomes stronger and deeper than ever before. This does not reflect dependency or weakness, but rather a transformation into a more noble role, becoming keepers of wisdom, teachers and lighthouses, illuminating the way for future generations. Buddhist philosophy always emphasizes the concept of interdependence, that we are all closely connected in a complex web of cause and effect. Although stillness brings great value to the individual, the ability to give selflessly is also an indispensable part of attaining fulfillment. Old age brings a unique opportunity for us to pass down experiences, serving as symbols of life's journey and leaving behind something greater than ourselves. Family, whether biological or chosen, is a space where unconditional love and deep-rooted bonds flourish. A simple conversation with grandchildren sharing stories of perseverance through adversity, or gently guiding them through life's uncertainties, are all priceless gifts carrying great responsibility. In those moments, we see the continuation of ourselves, a ripple of impact that extends far beyond the years of a single lifetime. Community also plays an essential role in maintaining a sense of belonging, from a familiar face at the market corner, a neighbor with a warm smile, to a group of practitioners sitting in meditation together. Connections at this stage no longer revolve around ambition or superficial activities, but are defined by authenticity and depth of soul. Furthermore, the act of giving, whether through wisdom, presence, or simply offering a listening ear, becomes an endless source of happiness. In Buddhism, the practice of generosity is not just about material things, but also the broadness of the heart, helping to dissolve the ego and nurture infinite peace. The deepest lesson is that true connection does not lie in quantity or obligation, but in total presence. Through what we share, we are contributing to a living legacy that continues to exist long in the hearts of those who remain. Lesson 6. Letting go of social expectations. The world outside often imposes on us a biased yardstick, suggesting that life is only truly vibrant when filled with countless friends and boisterous gatherings. They sow seeds of fear regarding isolation, viewing it as a flaw to be avoided at all costs. However, Buddhist wisdom reminds us that suffering actually arises when we cling to those transient expectations. Old age is a golden opportunity for us to step away from the noise of the crowd and begin living according to our own principles. Throughout much of our lives, we are molded by invisible external pressures regarding what we should achieve, how we should behave, and even whom we should associate with to be considered successful. We busily pursue recognition, seeking our self-worth in superficial numbers, but at some point, an awakening will come to make us realize that none of those things define our true essence. Letting go of social expectations means embracing the freedom to live in the most authentic way. You no longer have any obligation to maintain friendships that drain your energy, nor do you need to force yourself into old molds of a dynamic social life. True peace does not lie in pleasing others, but in respecting your inner voice. This shift is not a cowardly withdrawal from life, but an engagement with the world on your own terms. It can begin with choosing meaningful stillness over forced interactions, or establishing personal boundaries to prioritize quality over quantity. Perhaps it is simply about letting go of the guilt when saying no to standards that are no longer appropriate. When we tightly bind our personal value to the level of our social activity, we inadvertently place our happiness in the hands of others. But when we strip away these chains of expectation, we open the door to a new kind of inner depth, a satisfaction rooted in presence, self-acceptance, and inner tranquility. At the end of the day, the only measure of a life well lived is whether you have found peace within your own soul. Lesson 7. Redefining connection in a new reality. As the body begins to slow down and energy is no longer as abundant as before, we often mistakenly believe that social relationships will also gradually wither away. However, Buddhist philosophy teaches us how to adapt without resistance, transforming physical changes into an invitation to redefine how we experience bonding. Connection does not necessarily have to be crowded gatherings, grand celebrations, or conversations lasting for hours. In reality, the most authentic engagement often hides within the smallest and simplest gestures. It could be a warm smile given to a stranger on the street, the clear laughter of a child echoing through a quiet afternoon, or the gentle joy of receiving a heartfelt handwritten letter. These fleeting moments sometimes carry a greater spiritual weight than an entire evening of forced laughter and talk. Furthermore, we should also open our hearts to embrace modern methods of maintaining deep affections without exhausting ourselves. Today's technology offers wonderful opportunities to stay in touch in the gentlest and most proactive ways. A video call to see a loved one's face, a sincere text message, or even a shared silence over the phone is enough to remind us that we always have each other's presence. Instead of pressuring ourselves to follow outdated social obligations, we have every right to choose interactions that are nourishing and reciprocated. True connection does not require constant physical movement, but rather the presence of the soul. Instead of lamenting what we no longer have the strength to do, let us ask ourselves how to experience a connection that fits our current reality. Perhaps it is deepening existing relationships instead of busily searching for new ones, or cultivating an intimate link with nature to feel the heartbeat of life in every breath of the wind. By redefining in this way, we liberate ourselves from invisible pressures and discover that connection does not lie in the number of people surrounding us, but in the depth with which we interact with the life right before our eyes. Lesson 8. A legacy of wisdom. Buddhist philosophy affirms that the most noble gift a person can leave behind for life is not a massive fortune or a prestigious social status, but rather wisdom. Old age is not a stage for accumulating more material possessions, but a time to refine and distill life to its core essence. Through the stories we tell of our personal experiences, we pass down precious guidance wrapped in the flow of our own history. Every small act of kindness we perform becomes a living lesson in compassion for future generations. By embodying peace, we become living testaments to tranquility, reminding those around us that true happiness lies not in material possession, but in the clarity of an unburdened mind. Even in solitude, the ripples of our impact continue to spread endlessly. A life lived with wisdom is a life that never ends, for every seed of understanding and every word of encouragement we plant will continue to bloom in the hearts of those who remain. This is how we engrave our mark upon the world, not through lifeless stone monuments, but through the positive transformation in the souls of those we have touched. Lesson 9. Embracing the gift of your own company. At the heart of Buddhist philosophy lies the understanding that suffering often arises from a longing for what we do not have and a resistance toward the present reality. However, when we learn to sit with ourselves to embrace our own presence, we unlock a source of unshakable joy. This is a kind of happiness that does not depend on external conditions, but shines from within like a quiet and radiant lamp. Old age is not a time of loss, but a season of great spiritual harvest. This is a journey back to the self, an opportunity to live fully and authentically without being weighed down by the expectations of others. We have spent too much time molding ourselves to fit social norms, playing exhausting roles, and maintaining relationships out of mere responsibility. But in stillness, those masks naturally fall away, revealing the original and honest truth of who we are. There is a sacred beauty in this process, as the silence that once made us fearful now becomes a sanctuary, and the stillness once perceived as emptiness transforms into a space of infinite depth. We begin to truly listen to our inner voice, the quiet wisdom that has been whispering to us all along. In solitude, we realize a profound truth. Happiness was never outside of us. It has always been there, patiently waiting for us to recognize it. Many fear that embracing solitude means abandoning all human connections. But this is quite the opposite of the truth. When we attain self-peace, we interact with others through sincerity instead of need or deficiency. Relationships become lighter and more meaningful because they are no longer burdened by dependency. We give love not because we are lacking, but because we are overflowing with abundance. And then a great realization will dawn. We were never truly alone. The universe is not separate from us. It moves within us and breathes with us through every blade of grass, the wind, and the sunlight. Solitude, in its truest sense, is not isolation, but a union with the vast nature of all existence. Do not mourn for what has passed. Cherish your own presence right now. For in that stillness we have not lost ourselves, but have truly found the way home. At the heart of Buddhist philosophy lies the understanding that suffering arises from a longing for what we do not have and a resistance toward the present reality. However, when we learn to sit with ourselves to embrace our own presence, we unlock a source of unshakable joy. This is a kind of happiness that does not depend on external conditions, but shines from within like a quiet and radiant lamp. Old age is not a time of loss, but a season of great spiritual harvest. This is a journey back to the self, an opportunity to live fully and authentically without being weighed down by the expectations of others. We have spent too much time molding ourselves to fit social norms, playing exhausting roles, and maintaining relationships out of mere responsibility. But in stillness, those masks naturally fall away, revealing the original and honest truth of who we are. There is a sacred beauty in this process, as the silence that once made us fearful now becomes a sanctuary, and the stillness once perceived as emptiness transforms into a space of infinite depth. We begin to truly listen to our inner voice, the quiet wisdom that has been whispering to us all along. In solitude, we realize a profound truth. Happiness was never outside of us. It has always been there, patiently waiting for us to recognize it. Many fear that embracing solitude means abandoning all human connections, but this is quite the opposite of the truth. When we attain self-peace, we interact with others through sincerity instead of need or deficiency. Relationships become lighter and more meaningful because they are no longer burdened by dependency. We give love not because we are lacking, but because we are overflowing with abundance. And then, a great realization will dawn. We were never truly alone. The universe is not separate from us. It moves within us and breathes with us through every blade of grass, the wind, and the sunlight. Solitude, in its truest sense, is not isolation, but a union with the vast nature of all existence. Do not mourn for what is past. Cherish your own presence right now. For in that stillness we have not lost ourselves, but have truly found the way home.